Hey there, YouTube. Today in the shop I have a 2001 Ford Escape with the 3.0 Duratec V6. As you can see, there's a few things going on here today, but the subject for today's video is the replacement of the engine oil pressure switch or sensor. We noticed that the sensor has a leak, and it's generally not a good thing when these things start to leak because they can fail and dump all of your oil out the side of the engine block. It's not a terribly hard job to do, but there are a few things that we need to remove before we can even get to the sensor. So I'll get the camera moved and we can get going on this process.
We're going to have to remove this splash shield here. It's held in by a few 10mm bolts. One's right here, one's on the in the fender well here, and there's another one here and another one here. So we'll go ahead and remove all of those so that we can get this out of the way. Next on the agenda is to get the serpentine belt removed so that we can move the air conditioning pump away from the block a little bit so we can access
the oil pressure switch.
To do this, you'll need a 1/2-inch drive on the belt tensioner right here. There's a little square 1/2-inch hole right here, as you can see. I'm just going to use a breaker bar here, and we'll just pull the tensioner to release tension from the belt. Slowly lock the tensioner back. You don't want to let this. You don't want to let this snap back. You can hurt yourself and hurt other things here. So now that the belt is removed from the AC pump, we can go ahead and remove the 4 mounting bolts here. All right, I might have misspoken. So there's 3 bolts holding the AC compressor to the block. So I'm going to remove those here. They are a 13mm head. Get that final bolt out. The compressor should be able to drop here. We can just let it hang, but I'm going to go ahead and grab a bungee cord or something here to secure it kind of out of the way. All right, so once the AC compressor is out of the way and tied up, as you can see here, I've got it kind of just bungee corded out of the way. We have access to the oil pressure switch. So we'll need to release the connector. It's just one of these connectors where you have to push the release tab to get it undone, and then loosen the oil pressure switch from the engine block. This is a 13/16. You can use an oil pressure socket, or in a lot of cases just a regular deep socket from, say, Harbor Freight would work just fine. So we'll go ahead and disconnect the connector here and screw this out of the engine block. Keep in mind, some oil might come down, so you want to have some containment down below. As you can see here, while I had the camera off and was able to use both hands, I was able to get this connector off. This is the release tab that you push on. So you push on the release tab and pull the connector out. Sometimes it helps to push the connector towards the switch, then push the release button, and then pull the whole connector out. They're pretty finicky at times. And you can see here, this is dripping wet with oil. This sending unit or pressure switch has failed. So now I've got a deep socket 13/16. I thought I would bring something up here. There are 2 listings for the oil pressure switches on these Escapes. The NAPA part numbers are below here, so OP6216 and OP6219. The difference is the thread size. So on the 2 different switches here, we have a 3/8 pipe thread size, and we have a 1/4-inch pipe thread size. And there's not really an easy way to know which one your vehicle has, aside from just pulling out the existing switch and matching it up. So in this case, I just bought both because I'm working after hours here. Our Napa is currently not open. So if you have the opportunity to pull it out ahead of time, one easy way to tell if you've got the 3/8 or the 1/4 inch size is to take an open-end wrench. So in this case, 11/16 wrench, and get it over the threads like this. You can see that's a pretty decent fit. If the 11/16 wrench fits over the threads on yours, then you have the 3/8 switch. So in this case, if you're using the Napa part number, it's the OP6216. Now, if the switch that you have is loose, so like in this case, we'll make like this is the one you pulled out. If you put the 11/16 open-end wrench on it and it rattles around, which you can see here, there's quite a bit of a gap there, but a 14mm wrench fits just fine in here, then you have the smaller 1/4 inch pipe thread size, which is OP6219. Again, I haven't found a rhyme or reason as to which engines, serial number on the engine or something that would have the bigger thread versus the smaller one. So, like I said, in this case, I went ahead and bought both. I'm just going to return the one that doesn't fit. In this case, it's the larger 3/8 size thread. So I've went ahead and cleaned out the oil out of the connector here with some contact cleaner, and I've also cleaned out the block here. So now it's just a matter of putting the new switch in. So we'll thread it in by hand, just to make sure we're not cross-threading it. And then from there, we just tighten it down with the same socket that we used to remove the old one. Okay, so you notice I'm choked up on the end of this wrench here. You don't want to be on the end like you normally would be. You want to be choked up here to reduce the amount of torque that you are using on the switch. Again, it's not a tight fit. And basically, as soon as you start feeling some resistance, that's where you stop. If I find a torque spec, I'll list it for you. As you might have noticed, there was some pipe thread tape on the switch. Most of these replacement switches already have some on there, so I didn't bother to add more. Whatever the factory put on is sufficient. If for whatever reason your replacement switch does not have the thread sealant on it, it'd be a good idea to put some on there before threading it into the block. So finally, the connector can go on and it snaps into place like so. And then we can proceed with putting the AC compressor back in its hole here. Okay, our viewpoint is still from the passenger wheel. My finger is pointing towards the front of the engine, or front of the engine compartment, that is, front bumper. We're gonna go ahead and put our tool back on the tensioner here, relieve tension so that we can pull the belt back on. All right, we wanna make sure that the belt is in the grooves of all the pulleys. The reason why I mention that is because up top here, I think this is the power steering pump, it's not quite on. So this is where a friend can be very handy. So I'm gonna go ahead and go on the top side here and try to get that belt aligned. I don't know how well you can see, but that belt's horribly misaligned. Since I'm by myself here, I'm gonna attempt to push on the breaker bar down below with my foot and see if I can just get enough slack here to put it over the power steering pump. Let's see how well I can do this. There we go. So I've got a little bit of tension on that with my foot. You can't really see it too well because the light's terrible, but we got it on the power steering pulley here correctly. We will release tension slowly on the tensioner. We'll go back down on the bottom and just ensure that the rest of the pulleys still have the belt on properly. Okay, so hopefully I'm not too shaky here. The crank pulley, we've got the belt around the crank pulley properly. It's engaged, belt centered. Same with the AC pulley up to the power steering pump, to the tensioner pulley, finally to the alternator. The belt is on properly, so that concludes that part. Now we'll work on putting the splash shield back on. From there we'll lower the vehicle.
And that concludes the repair.